Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the worlds that Obsidian has created for us. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1, 2, and Avowed. For anyone who isn't in the know, the reason we're pairing all those games together is because it shares the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so if you're a fan of any of those games, this show is for you to help dive in and understand the world that these games are made of, appreciate the writing and the lore and the stories, and maybe inspire another playthrough or a character at a tabletop game. If you're new to the show, really happy to have you here. Send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com, if you have any questions or if there's any topics that you'd like to hear more about. I always love having conversations with listeners and just gamers in general. Today's episode will be a good episode to start off with. It is not going to be relating to any spoilers from any of the games. But if you are new here, I am going to signpost you to episode 0, where I signpost you further to more foundational lore about the world, such as how magic works and the cycle of reincarnation that this world runs on. But if you don't want to do that, today's episode is perfectly fine to start off with. In this episode, I am going to be talking a little bit about the nation of Naasitaq. But specifically, I'm just going to be looking at a couple of moments within the history of Naasitaq. As I've been doing lately, I've been kind of going through every single unique item in like not alphabetical order, but some sort of order anyways. And I've just been reading these things and soaking in the stories of the world of Eora. And as a result, I find some that are really interesting and make me stop and think. And they also give me inspiration for writing, which I've been into lately. And coincidentally enough, has also been very good for coming up with episodes to talk about some of the lore of this world. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's not going to be a thoroughgoing episode about the Naasitaq themselves or the nation itself. But to be fair, there's not a lot about Naasitaq that we know. I think the most that we get about Naasitaq in the games of Pillars of Eternity and Avowed comes really from, I don't want to say vibes heavy, because there is information on it, but it definitely feels more like we're getting the vibes of Naasitaq than we are getting hard data about them. And after doing a little bit of reading in preparation for this episode, and just because I was interested in the topic, it really makes me wonder and want to explore that area more. And perhaps, Avowed 2, which apparently Obsidian wants to make, maybe there's a chance that Naasitaq could be the nation that game is set in. And I think it would be a really good game to set the game in, or a really good setting to place the game in. And there's, I think, a lot of potential to that as well. I know, though, if they were making that game, or if I was making a game anyways, I definitely would want to lean into some of the hunting aspects that would offer, and not just the story itself. I think it offers a really unique place to have some unique game mechanics. But whatever Obsidian wants to do with it, it's their thing, and I also would be excited for it regardless. So we're going to talk about Naasitaq today, and just a couple of stories in their history, and some characters that matter in there. As far as news goes, there's not really any news to talk about, I think, regarding Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. It's neat to see that there's still been activity on the Avowed Reddit of people playing the game of Avowed for the first time and really enjoying it. I think Avowed is kind of hitting that stage where the people who weren't playing it at launch are now enjoying the game, and those who were just, there's regular toxic people online who just hate things to hate things. That kind of discourse is gone. So all you're left with is people who are playing the game, who are really enjoying it, and people who play the game and still enjoy it, but have genuine critiques to offer, because there has always been critiques, and there has been things to poke at and point out to Obsidian, which they have addressed a lot of things over the past. But it's cool to enter into this stage of the game's life. And honestly, the older I get, and I don't want to say the less seriously I take gaming, because I still play games quite a lot, but the older I get, and I think the less, I guess, serious that I take gaming, more in the sense of I don't let it affect me as much. I think the more I'm starting to appreciate this particular stage in a video game's lifespan, where it's far after launch and people just enjoy the game to enjoy the game, and there's still some healthy talk going on about it, and people are just enjoying it for the first time. And I think I'm going to try to not be a person who chases a lot of brand new games, but that being said, I know when Fable comes out, I'm going to be all over it. Anyways, none of this is news. I don't know where I got off on this tangent. Well, let's dive into today's episode, shall we?
Half the locals would arrest you for trespassing and the rest would kill you outright. I'm curious, what exactly did you find there?
So today's episode starts off with an item reading called Bleak Fang, and this is what kind of set me on the whole tangent of looking into Naasitaq a little bit more. This is something I would like to do a little bit more research on, and perhaps that I'll be able to actually do some of that a little bit more and dive into the game itself and really play into it. But for now, this is where it started off with, and I'll take you along the journey that I went on with it. This is a weapon in the game called Bleak Fang. It is a unique stiletto weapon, and if you're new to Pillars of Eternity or Avowed, you'll know that, you may or may not know anyways, that the item descriptions in-game, especially for unique item descriptions, offer lore about the world, and quite often, these items are imbued with essence, which is the stuff that souls are made of, and it can have the energy and or memories of the person who created it or wielded it. And as a result, when you read the item descriptions in the game, you get these little stories and glimpses of people within the world of Eora, usually, and it tells their story or a very important moment with the weapon or armor that they had. In this case, it is this item, Bleak Fang, this stiletto, was in possession of a Naasitaq huntress, and it tells just a very, very small story of something that happened to her and why that is important. I mostly like this because it gave me a lot of inspiration for like a quest situation for tabletop gaming, but we'll get into that in a second. So, unique stiletto, this is the item description. A Naasitaq huntress was tracking game with the other wives of her tribe when a terrible blizzard separated her from the rest of the party. Starving and nearly snowblind, she ate the leather of her gloves to fill her belly while she searched for food. As her strength was fading, she came across the corpse of a caribou, frozen and half-gnawed by Arctic foxes. She ate her fill and, exhausted, fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, she saw the fingers of her left hand stricken with a numbing corruption. As she journeyed back in the direction of her village, she watched the corruption spread along her knuckles and across her hand. Unwilling to succumb to it, she took her stiletto and cut off her hand at the wrist. So I like this thing for a number of reasons. One is it gives a little bit of lore here without diving into it, where it says a Naasitaq huntress was tracking game with other wives of her tribe. And I really like that detail because it belies a very important aspect of the Naasitaq, kind of like society system, in that the wives go out and do all the hunting and the men stay home, which is like not the most new idea in fantasy or in any sort of written work. Like, oh yeah, let's switch the classical gender roles from tribal societies and see what happens, right? Like, we've all heard that before, but I still think it's interesting. And to be honest, there's a lot of times I've seen it where I don't know that the idea has borne fruit very well necessarily. I guess it depends on what the writer or the person who's making the media is saying. That being said, I haven't read or experienced every single one, but I still like it, right? I like this swapping of things. I like seeing what kind of stuff can come out of it. But regardless, we have this Naasitaq huntress who is tracking game with the other wives of her tribe, and as it says here, it's pretty straightforward in the story. She gets separated, she's starving, nearly snowblind, which is a real thing, and really can suck. I did an outdoor training for leadership, for leading expeditions overnight, and we had to do winter training, and snowblindness is one of the things that they really took to heart. In fact, of all the items that were on the required list of things that you had to bring to the leadership training, a pair of sunglasses was one of the few things that was required. Everything else, they were like, we'll provide everything else, but you have to have sunglasses because snowblindness is, very real thing. Anyways, so she eats her leather gloves to fill her belly. And I don't know if that would be a legitimate way to, I don't know, stave off starvation. I don't imagine there's really many nutrients inside of your leather gloves, but then again, I don't know, like, were these made, I don't know, I want to say made old-fashioned style, but where these gloves were almost certainly made not in like a mass production kind of way like we might be used to now. So would there be some sort of, I don't know, conservation of any level of nutrition? I don't know. But it says it was just a filler belly. So perhaps it was just I don't know, give her body something to burn. I don't know. To me, I would think that it would almost take more energy to break it down than it would actually provide energy. But regardless, she did it, and now she's going to look around for food, finds the corpse of a caribou frozen and half gnawed by Arctic foxes, as she ate her fill and then fell into a deep sleep. Now, I'm sure we all recognize that this is not necessarily the most wise thing to do, eating, a half-eaten corpse of a caribou out in the open, exposed to the elements, and not cooked. So there's a lot here that is like unwise. But at the same time, it's like, hey, one problem at a time. Like right now, the problem is starvation and dying in the snow. We'll cross the problem of possible foodborne illnesses when we get back home, right? So you have one thing at a time. So she eats this stuff. She wakes up and she sees that her left hand is stricken with a numbing corruption. And I find it interesting that they label it as a corruption. It could have just been a numbing thing. It could have just been a pain, but it's some sort of corruption. It's visual. And as she's journeying back towards her village, she sees this corruption spreading along her knuckles and across her hand. So this is some sort of visual thing. And this lines up as well with the mechanics of this item in the game. You get this ability called Touch of Rot. So if you if you handle this stiletto, you have it equipped on your character in the game, you get access to this druid ability called Touch of Rot, which is described as a caster's hand emanate decay, causing immediate corrosive damage, and then more damage over time to anybody in the area. So basically, you can touch people, and this corrosion will spread about them and do damage to your enemies. And so it's very much kind of like this infection type thing. But it doesn't say infection, right? Like you can see the left hand is strict with a numbing infection. It says corruption. Now, I don't know if that's so it would line up with the words that were in the game mechanics, or if it's trying to intimate something else about what's going on here. Could this be that it was some sort of infliction from the god Galawain because, I don't know, she did something she wasn't supposed to? I highly doubt it, but if I find that interesting nonetheless. And in the end, she doesn't want this corruption to be brought back to her village. So she takes out this stiletto, Bleak Fang, and cuts off her own hand at the wrist. And that's probably why this memory is the one that is housed within Bleak Fang, or the one that you can get out of it, is because this is such an intense emotion, and there's such an intense memory that it would almost certainly be imprinted upon this weapon, upon this item. As we've discussed in previous episodes, the soul is made up of essence, and essence is the seed of personality, memory, and consciousness. And as a result, those things can kind of be imprinted upon the items that people have and people use. If you'd like to hear a little bit more how that might work, I've done an episode on that you can listen to. And so this memory being imprinted upon this item, Bleak Fang, makes sense. It also, for me, gave me a lot of inspiration in terms of writing for fantasy tabletop games about this woman who tries to come back into town, but her hand has a weird corruption on it, and she doesn't know what it is, and she cuts off her arm. There's something else there, right? Like, was there something about the caribou corpse, or was this like a bait and switch, or not a bait and switch, but was this planted by someone, and this hand that's left behind, does one of the animals get it and spread the corruption in the forest, and does that corruption turn the animals into these, I don't know, these wilder beasts and all that kind of a thing? It leads to a situation that I think could be very interesting to explore and have fun with in a tabletop role-playing setting, which a lot of you, if you've been listening to the show, I am spending a lot more time doing than anything else. And this little story led me to ask, what else do we really know about Naasitaq? Because I know that it is an island nation south of the Deadfire Archipelago and north of the White That Wends. and that it is comprised of tribal societies where the women go out and do the hunting and the men stay back. I know the story of Sagani personally because she is one of the companions that we get to have in Pillars of Eternity 1. We know a little bit about her family and the tribe she comes from. We get those snippets in the game, but like, what else do we really know about the island nation of Naasitaq? And I didn't like do a ton of digging on it, but I didn't find much to go with. You look up the Naasitaq entry on Pillars of Eternity fandom website, and you get Naasitaq is a remote island nation located in the Deadfire Archipelago. Many boreal dwarves and Almaua share the rocky tundra and snow-covered forests with far-roaming caravan elves who drift near the shoreline. Naasitaq is the biggest and most stable nation around. Various nations and empires fight over the islands to the east, of which there are sea monsters that invariably annihilate any ships that attempt to go exploring, many of them dwarven. All right, so there's not even a lot there that we can cover. We talk a little bit of geography with it being rocky tundra, a snow-covered forest. We talk a little about the neighboring nations and races, such as the elves from the White That Wins, and then there's the Amauans from the more, I guess, tropical Deadfire Archipelago to the north. Technically speaking, I guess this is part of the Deadfire Archipelago, but I think it's kind of got a unique identifier of its own. The other thing it says here is that it's the biggest and most stable nation around. I didn't realize it was the biggest. That's one thing that I did learn from this, is that it's considered the biggest and most stable nation around. I could see it being the most stable, not in the sense that it's xenophobic, but in the sense that they're fairly isolated. Like, they are very much like the White That Wins in that they are isolated, but not so isolated that people wouldn't be there. I just think there's not a lot there that people are necessarily interested in, and that has given them a stability as a result. Now, them being the biggest, that is an interesting piece of information. But like anything, it's on the fandom website, so I mean, maybe it could be wrong, but technically speaking, all of these things are sourced, and in this particular instance, it's interviews or posts by Josh Sawyer, the lead designer and director for the game itself. Now, if you do find yourself interested in a little bit more Naasitaq culture, there is a book of poetry that you can pick up within any of the games called Naasitaq Poetry, a Compilation. And in there, you get to read one particular poem. I'm not going to read it here just because we have read it in other episodes before, but it's a very interesting read in and of itself. It has this same pattern that kind of repeats itself, where it has two stanzas followed by a single line, and it repeats this 3 times. And each of the first stanzas start off with 2 words going I, then blank, and it goes I move, I search, I travel. And so those are like the 3 sections of this very emotional story that's being told here. I've read this multiple times, and I often wonder what the poem is trying to necessarily communicate other than this person's journey. I have a hard time with poetry. I have a very analytical and data-driven mind, and I've always had a hard time reading poetry and pulling out the emotion from it and understanding that sometimes that's all that is the point of a good poem. As I've been getting older, and maybe because I'm a dad now, maybe I have a little bit more appreciation for it, but I'm definitely a novice in understanding and appreciating poetry. Regardless, I do find myself enjoying this one just because, it's part of a game that I know and love, and I've read it many times, and I recognize these patterns that are in here. It tells a story about someone who is moving forward, not of compulsion or need. It's just they are drawn forward, but they are stuck within this blizzard, if you will, and they're being tracked by wolves. So you get this very strong feeling of being a weak, small thing in a hostile environment that could very easily take over and destroy you. And this person is searching for things, but it doesn't really say what it is. And in the second stanza, it just continues talking about how relentless and awful the situation is that they are in. And not that they are succumbing to despondency, but it's a description of all these things. Like their hunt continues unabated, but they don't have anything that we know that they're hunting. Perhaps it's just hunting in general. So, and I guess a person who is Naasitaq would understand this. Perhaps they would just innately know that this is talking about being in a hunt in general, and you need food for your family, you need food for your tribe. And so there could be this desperation that's in here with the person who's writing it. But then by the end of the poem, things have switched. What started off with no compulsion, with no need, is now a true compulsion. Them traveling forward, there is a need that drives them on. And they describe it as saying that they must see something. So I get the feeling like they're searching for a thing, but we're not really privy to what that thing is. The sun breaks through and eventually warms their body, and there's just a little bit of hope. But then the whole poem ends with, all is empty. The breath of existence is my destination. I don't know. To me, that last line is very, I don't want to say sad, but it's I don't know. It's melancholic. I felt like it was supposed, because you had this previous stanza saying, the sun breaks through the gray, the unrelenting gaze thaws me, my body warms under its touch, frigid limbs move again and carry me further, and then all is empty. The breadth of my existence is my destination, or breadth of existence is my destination. And I don't know, it had this like little moment of warmth and hope, and then it kind of has this almost cynical, nihilistic line right at the end there. And again, maybe it's just my comprehension skills in this area are not very good, but it's such a switch at the very end there. And I'm not sure exactly what's trying to be expressed in that. But hey, if anyone listening to this is very good with poetry and the like, and you have any interpretations on it, go ahead and check it out, give it a read, tell me what you think, and I'll discuss it on a future episode. But that gives a little bit into like the culture of the Naasitaq people that Obsidian have created for this world. Yes, poetry is a form of cultural expression. Regardless of who writes it and from which culture, it expresses an individual's point of view, or expresses this one author's understanding of the world and their emotions that they have, which is formed by the society that they're in. And so poetry is cultural expression, and this is one way to get more of the Naasitaq vibes, if you will, like I talked about earlier on. The only other thing that I can really find that we definitely for sure know about Naasitaq, again, outside of Sagani and her story, which I've done an episode on, is this one item called Borresain, Borresaine. And this talks about one particular moment within the history of the world. So this is a historical moment in the Naasitaq times. And it's mostly just about a really harsh winter. The dwarven clan of Langmere dwelt in the wilds of Naasitaq, hunting game and surviving off the harsh land. Summers were brief and winters difficult. But in the winter of 2562 AI was one of the hardest in the tribe's long history. A mighty snow leopard had established territory nearby, scaring off much of the game near the village. By Fonaughton, the hunters were returning with little more than rabbits, and the winter freeze was nigh. A dozen of the best hunters stuck out across the tundra, determined to hunt the great cat. The beast was craftier than they planned, and by Inverno, half of the hunters and most of their hunting foxes had been slain without so much as wounding the leopard. Desperate and furious, one of the hunters crafted a bow from the bones of their slain fox, and as her remaining companions looked on, it seemed that all of her rage was channeled into the weapon while she carved and shaped it. Her work completed, she set off and tracked the beast to its lair. Once she killed it, she decorated her bow with its teeth as a reminder of the deed and the long and tragic hunt. Now, black with age and use, this bow is nevertheless fierce to behold. It's studded with the teeth of a large cat, and the notches curve in tight spirals. I had originally thought that Borresain was a real-life word that meant something in another language, but I couldn't actually find any reference to that. So it's just a really cool word. Anyways, so this bow describes a very harsh winter, and so the only lore we're getting from this is in the year 2562, which is 250-ish years, or a little less than 250 years in the past of when Pillars of Eternity 1 happens. There was a really harsh winter in Naasitaq, which is a very harsh winter. And in this one localized area, there was a snow leopard that caused a really big problem for a local tribe. And it just tells the story of a person who crafted a bow and killed the creature and used its teeth on its bow. There's a number of hunters that were killed in the process, along with their hunting foxes. Right, so it does tell the specific story of this one tribe and their plight against this snow leopard, and again, really vibes heavy. And I think that's something that Obsidian has been very good at, is they've been great at evocative writing. They have this writing that tells a lot in a very short period of time. You have this small couple of paragraphs here, and in it you understand so much about what the vibes of the Naasitaq faction is from the minds of Obsidian, right? you get the idea that they're going for. Like, these are people who live in tribal societies. They live in this like rocky tundra and this snow forested area, and they engage in hunting and gathering. They're bringing back rabbits. They're trying to bring back, foxes and deer and bigger things like that. They have to deal with snow leopards. They're crafting wooden bows and all this kind of stuff. You get a lot about what they are as an archetype in such a small section of lines. And that's really where a lot of the Naasitaq lore comes from, is those kind of lines where we get these vibes, the very specific things that I like to look for, such as there being a dwarven clan called Langmere is one of them. And, the names of these different clans, or the names of the regions, or specific historical events, or the fact that their societal structure has the women going out rather than the men. It's those like specific pieces of lore are usually the things I look for. But these are, I have to be able to remember that these dots of information are going upon the blanket of the vibe, which is the archetype of this faction that Obsidian has created. And so as I continue moving forward doing this show and reading the lore about this world and replaying the games and talking with people in the community about it, I look towards the future of Obsidian hopefully playing or making another game in this world, an Avowed 2, a Pillars of Eternity 3, or something else entirely. And I think to myself that Naasitaq would be a really interesting place to set a game. I would really like to see what they would do with it. Now, granted, you could say that about any area of the world. Rauatai is also very interesting and has a rich culture that they have kind of developed already, whereas Naasitaq is a little bit more of a blank slate. There's not as much to do there. But at the same time, that I think offers a new creative challenge for them as well. So I say it about every single setting or place, but it really would be an interesting place to set in. Is it my top pick for the places I'm most intrigued in? Not really. The reason being is that I like the grandiose, world-bending type of lore, the stuff that Adir is doing, the stuff that the Ingwithans did, the things that were going on in Deadfire Archipelago. I feel like there's great mysteries in The White That Wins. I feel like there is stuff that is untouched and yet very powerful in the nation of Rauatai. I think that there are old secrets and knowledge in the familial noble halls of Grand Valia that, are now emptied and et cetera, et cetera. There's so much that I think that they could go, whereas I don't know that there are ancient secrets lying in Naasitaq, right? But maybe there is, why did people settle there in the first place? Maybe they're guarding some sort of secret. I don't know. I think that trope might have been played a little bit already in Avowed with the last biome of the game. But regardless, there's something that they could do with that. Not that they necessarily have to, sometimes that's just where people live and they're just trying to survive and that's all it is. And that can be a good game on its own. But regardless, I've kind of beat that horse to death. That is all for today's lore. Let's close out the episode. If you liked today's episode, please send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. And if you didn't like today's episode, please send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. I love having discourse about this stuff. I like talking about games and Eora in particular. But also, if you're a gamer out there and you just want to talk about something that you are into, whether it's this game or not, I love having those conversations, and I've gotten to meet a lot of really interesting people over the years as a result. So inbox is always open. Please send an email, let me know. And I'm open to topic suggestions as well. Otherwise, I'll just keep picking stuff for each week at a time. Thank you for your patience for those of you who've been long listeners in the summertime, as there's family things going on and covering vacations and plans on the weekend. So I know it's been 3 weeks since my last episode, so I appreciate your patience in that regard. I'm going to still try to keep up with my regular cadence, but we all know what summer can get like for people. And as a side, and on a side note, I'm moving into a new position in my company, and so a lot of my mental focus has been going on to that. I am not it's not like a promotion or something. I don't know what you would call it. I'm moving from the front counter into the office for inside sales, stuff like that. And so it's an interesting transition. We'll see if it holds. I do like being at the front counter. I'm going to miss my front counter compatriots. I felt like a little family up there, but I've always been motivated more by where I can supply the greatest need wherever I'm working at. And I know that sounds lame and eye-rolly, but that's the case, right? I got paid more than enough at front counter. I'm happy to stay there. I don't even know if there's a pay increase, to be honest. I want to be useful, I guess, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of people do want that, right? I think that's where a lot of Anyways, I don't need to get into that kind of stuff. Nobody needs to know Gingerino's thoughts about fulfillment and work and purpose and stuff like that. If you're interested in knowing, email me, worldofeora@gmail.com. What have I been playing lately for those? Because this is a game podcast primarily, well, I guess secondarily. I have been playing recently, anyways. The game I've been playing the most is Subnautica 2. I have a coworker who has gotten into Subnautica, and he's like one of the few people at my workplace that are really into video games, so I was like, I need to get into this game as well. So I gave it an honest try and was kind of meh about it at first, but that as I, continued playing it so I could talk about it with my friend at work, I came to really enjoy Subnautica 2. And now he has moved on to a new game. I am still playing Subnautica 2, really enjoying it and finding myself looking forward to the content updates as it continues on through early access. So I'm almost at the point now in Subnautica 2 where it stops, like there's nothing else to do except build your base, which I'm kind of excited for. I'm excited to be done the carrot chasing, having a little thing in the distance to go and investigate, which forces me to build new things, which forces me to do X, Y, Z. If you've done survival crafting, you know how the game works. So I'm looking forward to being done that for a little while and just focus on building a really expansive base in this new area. And then when content comes out or new things come out, I can jump in and just keep on going with this little, a mass of resources I have made for myself. So yeah, I'm having fun with it. That being said, I have a feeling once I reach the narrative end, or at least once I'm done chasing those carrots, I have a feeling I might spend a session or two building my base and then just abandon it entirely to play a new game, because I've been gaming for over 3 decades at this point in time, and I've learned to recognize the patterns in how I play a video game. When I'm done this little section, I don't think I'll play it for very much longer. I will want to move on to something new and novel, and that's just, I know that about myself. Whatever that's going to be, I don't know. I am almost done the game Aphelion, so maybe I'll just finish that off. And otherwise, I'm going to consider just going deeper into my backlog. With the precedent being set that Xbox is going to be doing more layoffs, I've really considered how much disdain I have for a lot of things within the industry of video games, and not because I'm this big sad guy and in video games and everything's awful and everything sucks. I've been playing video games since I was 4 years old. I love video games. I think they are great. I think more people should play more games more often. I've said that before, and I will continue to say it. I think games are great. And it's not that I've just noticed that people are negative when it comes to video game discourse. It's like that anywhere. You want to get into books, that's going to happen. You want to get into fragrances, that'll happen. I'm just picking my wife's recent hobbies anyways, but that'll happen no matter where you are. But I've noticed that the video game industry is big now, right? Like, it's big, it's AAA, it's mainstream, it's popular, it makes more money than other industries have that have been around for a long time. And it's lost that kind of niche charm that I've had in my youth, when video games were for those kinds of people, which, yeah, most of us were those kind of people. And not to say video games didn't have its problems back then. There definitely was, right? Like certain depictions of different people groups in video games, and the way that ideas and messages and I don't want to say ethical training, but the way things were communicated to these young minds, sometimes there were questionable messages in certain games, and that's fine, right? That's not, video games aren't exclusive to having those issues in it. But it felt like you were part of this small niche club of people that did this thing. Even though you knew there were a lot of people out there that played video games, it wasn't this big, expansive, massive thing. And now it is this behemoth. And as a result of it being this behemoth, a lot of things feel commodified, which is understandable, right? It is an industry. People need to get paid. You can't have a game designer make a great game and then not pay them for it just because art should be free, man. We get that. There has to be money for it, and it has to be profitable. I understand that. I think a lot of people understand that. But at the same time, it is upsetting to see that there's all these game developers that are going to lose their jobs. And there's these games that can get canceled that are almost done, And that if you're an industry veteran who's been around forever and you've pioneered some great titles, you're not immune from getting shut down. And this isn't just a hit against Xbox. I've been a very big fan of Xbox, actually, since I got my Series S years ago. I've kind of fallen out of love with Sony over the years, but now I'm also falling out of love with the Xbox. And, there's certain problems with the PC platforms that I don't like. And that's not me saying that everything's awful. That's just me kind of going, I think I want to approach gaming differently. I want to get back to that kind of attitude I had when I was younger, where I was just looking for cool games to play, and then I would play them, and that was it. I do still want to keep up with video game news and stuff because it has been an important part of my life and people are discussing it. And I do think it matters because there are livelihoods that are part of it. And having a voice, anyone having any voice, even like just one person reviewing a game on Steam, I think it matters in some degree, right? Because it contributes to the overall messages of like what gamers want, what developers want, what these businesses want that are trying to like keep these things going. Because as much as we give a lot of hate to the big corporations, man, they are making games alive, right? Like they are supplying the money into an industry that needs money to survive so that more games can be made. You know, and as much as I am also critical about big corporations, and, you know, I also have to recognize the need that they are fulfilling within the industry. Do I think there should be big change? And do I think they should definitely alter the way they're doing stuff? 100%. But does that mean that they need to just be exploded away? No, like there's a lot of good that can be done with that stuff. But regardless, this is also not why you're here. That's what I've been playing, and that's what I've been thinking about. So I don't know that I'm going to be playing a million new games. I'm going to be playing Fable when it comes out. I'm looking forward to that. I've been wanting to dive into Kingdom Come 2, but I also have a huge backlog like the rest of you to go play, and I'm wondering if maybe it's time to just start doing that. I don't know. Any of you out there have a backlog you need to work through and you need a buddy to just work through it with, hit me up. Maybe we'll just like keep each other accountable for playing certain games. If you have Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon, so do I. I haven't touched it yet. Maybe I should. Let me know. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for listening to today's episode, primarily of which was supposed to be about Naasitaq, and listening to my rant at the end. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, then send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do so at ko-fi.com/worldofeora. I just post that there so that people who find value in supporting the things that they like can do so. Don't feel any need to do it if that's not something that you can afford or want to. But if you do want to support the show, but not financially, perfectly fine. Just leave a rating or review or whatever platform you're listening to this on. Just engage with it in some way, shape, or form so this gets in the hands of other people and we can keep growing and talking and getting to know each other and helping each other out. Anyways, thanks everybody. Hope you liked it. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.